One of the most important traits to teach staff at any company, not just at summer camp, is accountability. Join us today and our special guest, Kim Aycock, as we discuss how to teach accountability to your staff.
This is Camp Code, another innovative podcast brought to you by Go Camp Pro. Camp Code is dedicated to helping you create and facilitate the most effective leadership training so we can raise the bar for professionalism and preparedness of our staff. You can find our show notes and our blog for summer camp leaders and directors at gocamp.pro.
Imagine camp registration software that actually gives you more time to do what you love. With UltraCamp, you can effortlessly track attendance, manage staff, streamline registration, and more. Explore now at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode.
Welcome to Camp Code, a podcast brought to you by Go Camp Pro. After 10 years of podcasting, is there anything left to say? You bet. Because just like people grow and change, so does our industry. Each and every year, there are new challenges, new ways of handling situations, new advice from those doing the work, and new ideas to share. Our commitment to intentional leadership training has only grown stronger. Well, welcome everyone, and before we dive into this all-important topic, I just would like us to take a moment to introduce ourselves, and we're going to start with our very special guest today, and you've heard her before this season, and we're so excited she's back. Kim, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Beth. My name is Kim Aycock. Pronouns are she, her, and it's nice to be with you in Atlantic City and be in person instead of on Zoom, right? And I like to say that I'm in the business of developing young people with those skills that robots can't do. Ooh. That's what I like to do. And so that shows up in working with, young people and emerging adults in camps. So.
Great. Well, welcome. We're super excited to have you back. And Kim has let the cat out of the bag. We're actually podcasting live from the 4th floor of the Atlantic City Convention Center at Tri-State, which we learned this morning is the biggest Tri-State they've ever had. So more people here than ever before. So it's really exciting for us to be back. And I'm Beth, Allison. I'm co-founder of Camp Hacker and Go Camp Pro, and my pronouns are she, her. And I, too, am a camp consultant like Kim, and we gel because we have the same philosophy about really intentional leadership training and helping our staff to bring their very best. So welcome to our 144th episode. And welcome back, Kim. It is really exciting to have you back. I'm so glad we were able to make this work and to give you a hug in person today. We're going to be discussing accountability. So why it's important, what happens when accountability lapses, and how do we teach it, particularly to folks for whom this may be their very first job. And when I looked it up, I thought I should look it up. So the definition of accountability in the workplace means that all employees are responsible for their actions, behaviors, performance, and decisions. So accountability to me suggests that we answer to someone or something, to our people, to our staff, to our campers, to our parents, our donors, our board members, overarching organizations, but also to our mission and our vision and our values and our purpose. Okay, so we're going to just jump right in. Kim, why do you think accountability is necessary? Why is it such an important part of what we do as camp people?
I think accountability is important because I like to think of it as a way of doing what we say we're going to do, or following through with what our words say, that our actions follow suit, that we're not just giving these empty sort of promises or empty things that we say we're going to do and then we never do them.
I love that. We have an incredibly important job, and there are thousands of us here in the convention center right now who believe very strongly in that. And we're tasked with and passionate about not only looking after other people's children, but also helping them to learn and grow and to become their best selves. And so we have to ensure that our staff, our folks that we've hired to do this, are committed and passionate about their roles this summer, or it all falls apart pretty quickly in my experience. Holding one another accountable builds trust and gives us focus, and it develops teams that think critically about camp's needs and how they can contribute. And our job, I think, as directors and camp professionals is to foster this. But how do we teach it? And is it a teachable trait? And for some staff, they may not have been asked to be held accountable, whether it's at home or at school, through no fault of their own. So this may be really new to some people. And I would like to know any pieces of advice that you would have for our listeners who are preparing for staff training. What are some ideas that you have to help teach this important piece of being a part of a team?
So one thing I think is really interesting, I'm going to back up just a little bit, is I think there's also being accountable to yourself, right? And like who you are. So I think if we help our staff kind of zoom in on who that person, that best version of themselves that they want to be, and they are focusing on that and sort of every day thinking about not your to-do list, but as my friend and our friend Jolly Corley likes to say, it's our to-be list. Who are we going to be today? And I don't think people get up and say, oh, I'm going to get up today and I'm going to like just not do anything that I'm supposed to do. Or I'm not
be lazy.
Yeah, I'm going to be lazy. If they tell me to
Cranky.
do something, I'm going to do the exact opposite. I don't think that's the intention there. But I think we have to kind of know and zoom in on who we are as a person so we can hold ourselves accountable and then help our staff hold themselves, but then help our staff hold each other accountable. And then that will trickle down to the campers as well. So
I love that. And of course, that's what we're trying to do, right, is to have that place where everybody feels like they can be their true selves and also become their best self. I think like most traits that we want our staff to learn and exhibit, we have to role model what we're looking for. And so we have to live in accordance with our own values and be accountable for our own actions, as you just said. And if staff can't see us walking the walk, then how do we expect them to do the same? And one of the most obvious ways to show accountability, but truthfully not the easiest way, is to own up to our own mistakes. So a key aspect of accountability is, and it's the first step in sort of learning from inevitable mistakes moving forward. So, for example, if we don't provide our staff with clear direction when they're taking on a new task, which then results in a poor performance of that task, our responsibility as directors or supervisors is to immediately share with that person as soon as we can that mistake was ours for not providing them better guidance or training or support. And it's saying, hey, I need you to know that this is on me, that I made that mistake and I didn't give it my best or give you my best. Or if we suggest or create a new program or protocol for camp and it doesn't work or go well, we have to own up to it and say, look, I had an idea and I thought it would work, but for these reasons that I now see in practice, I totally missed this part of the equation or this possibility, or I didn't think it fully through. So I remember one year Travis and I decided to change all of our meal times. So we weren't going to have breakfast. We were going to have like muffins at 7:30 in the morning and then like breakfast partway through the morning. And like we heard it at probably Tri-State and thought it was a really good idea to try. And about 6 days in, our kitchen staff came to us in tears and said, we cannot bake any more muffins. Like this is just, we can't do it this way. And so we had to say, yep, this was our idea and it just didn't work out. I made this error and now I have to correct it and accept that responsibility when things go wrong. And also, of course, give credit where credit is due. And being accountable, I think, helps us stay on track, especially when it does hit the fan, as it inevitably does during a summer. And if it never does for you, then please let us know. You'll be our next guest. But lack of accountability is bad for business and for camp's culture, which affects staff morale and motivation. And if our staff see that leaders don't respect camp's values, the risk of that unethical behavior then just sort of skyrockets. And I also think that staff are likely to feel disconnected to camp and to their fellow staff if you, as the leader, aren't holding yourself accountable and leading by example. I think role modeling accountability is making sure that your priorities are aligned with the camp's values and you check yourself regularly to make sure that all of your decisions and behaviors are meeting those goals and those standards that you set for your staff. Because if we're walking the walk, when your staff see this, it helps them to also be aligned with camp's priorities and values. and you'll have an easier time getting buy-in and providing targeted and then constructive feedback. So for me, step number one is like practicing what you preach, I suppose.
Well, and I think too, what you said is being transparent when you do kind of flub up sometimes, as we do, and that's just being a person, right? We just do that, is to, like you said, own up to it. And I think doing it early in staff training or that orientation time, so they see it and they are like, wow, you know, it's okay to make mistakes here, but it's also expected that we do own up. There's some responsibility, right. on us to own up to them and to make corrections if need be, or amends if need be, or whatever the situation kind of comes to. So one of my personal values, and you're going to probably laugh because you know I am a math person, and so in looking over the sort of picking kind of the words that I like to live by, one of them is congruence. And so to me that means that I do what I say I'm going to do. So it's really important to, like, and with the staff members, like I can remember last summer a staff member needed a piece of information, and I couldn't get it to them in a certain period of time. It just wasn't possible. But the first thing the next morning, I sought her out at breakfast, and I was like, Katie, I promised you this piece of information, and I'm giving it to you so that you can, know what's next for you, or that kind of thing. And I just think the more they see, I like to say, as promised, I am doing this, so that way they kind of make the connection that you are doing what you say you're going to do, kind of thing.
I love that language.
So, yeah. And
as promised.
As promised. Because then I think that also shows that you heard them, and that it's important to you to listen to what they have to say, or a request that they have, or a need that they have, and that you're going to follow through with that. So
I love that. I love that. Now, before we go any further, we're just going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsor. Remember what drew you to the camp experience? UltraCamp knows it wasn't for paperwork. That's why they've crafted an all-in-one platform to streamline your program management. Say goodbye to the hassle of learning and managing multiple platforms to run your camp. With UltraCamp, you can really easily register and manage campers, generate and direct communication, organize schedules and activities, process payments and donations. UltraCamp's goal is to help their clients spend less time in the office and more time doing what they love. Want to know if UltraCamp is the right fit for you? They offer free, customized demo sessions so you can see their software in action. Sign up at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. Okay, we are back, and I am happy to say that I met all of the UltraCamp people just before our podcast down in the exhibit hall at Tri-State. They're lovely folks, and we're so grateful to them for helping us to keep this show going. And we're going to have a couple of them on in just a few episodes, so we're excited for that. So we're back with Kim Aycock. We're sitting in room 416 of the Atlantic City Conference Center, and we're discussing accountability and how to teach it. So Kim, what's another idea you have to help folks teach accountability to young adults?
So actually this morning, I co-presented a session with Jeffrey Lycan, and we were talking about just kind of giving staff the impression that the way we do things at camp is differently than we do things at home. So our session was "This is not that." And so we gave some really good examples of what our default is when we're at home, maybe at school or at work, or, hanging out with friends or things like that. But at camp, we do things differently, right? And so we don't let people, we don't let others sit by themselves. We have clean communication, all those kinds of things. So we did this whole, that's a whole nother podcast. But one of the things that we got to is, okay, so we're gonna choose to live this way, and it is a choice, because we can choose to do things like our default method, or we can choose to do things differently in the camp world because we're in this different kind of community. So we talked about creating this code word that helps us keep ourselves accountable, but it also helps keep each other accountable.
Ooh, I like
this.
Yeah.
So it was pretty cool because, so I've done this with several camps actually, and we're trying to come up with a code word. And sometimes your camp has its own word already that you could use just because it just kind of makes sense, or it surfaces during that training time that just kind of encapsulates something that's happening for this particular group at this particular time, and you couldn't create it ahead of time, and you wouldn't probably create it after. It's just in the moment. It's what makes sense, right?
Yep,
okay. Yeah. So my co-presenter and very dear friend Jeff Lykin gave an example of a camp who you could tell the director by his actions and words that he was always all in. So that became their code word, was we're going to be all in, right? And you could you could come up to somebody and say, okay, we're going to be all in, right? Or, wow, you were really all in for that particular, activity or that particular, moment in the daily schedule, that kind of thing. It could also be that the staff create their own code word. So I was working with this camp in Texas last summer, and we were, doing this similar kind of exercise, and I was mentioning the code word thing, and I gave him a couple examples. So my husband and I have our own code word. It's coyote. I have it's just one of those things that came off the top of our heads when we had a vendor at our house was going to redo the fence, and we could just tell that this was not the person that we wanted, but they were trying to kind of bamboozle us a little bit. So we decided after this particular situation, we would create a code word. So if we ever got it in that same thing again, we could say coyote, and we would just know, okay, no, we're not doing this. This is not a...
I'm trying to picture how you work that word into the conversation.
You just say coyote, and then they know. They just know. So at this particular camp, I was giving the story of coyote, and then another code word that my sister and I use is jello. And so when we might have a family member that we need to maybe express a little, vent a little bit without being too critical, and just get it out. And she and I know what that is. We use the word jello, right? And so if somebody would pick up your phone and they just saw jello, they wouldn't think anything, like you weren't bashing anybody or anything, right? Okay. So this particular camp decided they wanted to use the word jello, but they took it a little bit further. So if I saw you doing something that was, where you were holding yourself accountable, or you were doing something in the camp way that is different how we would do it back at home, you were being clean and clear with your communication, I could say, hey, Beth, I saw some green jello today. So green jello was the code word. If you saw somebody who might be kind of like teetering, kind of slipping, going back to old ways, you could say, or even catching yourself, like, wow, I was almost, I was slipping away from the green jello today. I'm now yellow. Or if you truly were doing something that's like, you were gossiping about somebody, that's red jello. Like we don't do that at camp. So they created this whole color system with jello and their code word, and that's how they held each other accountable. So yeah, pretty simple, right?
But also they own it.
They own it.
And it's their
Yes.
choice, and then they know what it means.
Yeah.
But I don't know what would have happened the first day they served red jello for lunch. I don't know how that would go, but
You could use it as a teachable moment, Beth, right?
That's right. My second point would be to walk them through it. Walk them through what it means to be accountable. Front-loading expectations during hiring process, the inquiry process, really. I think some of our frustration comes from expecting staff know already how to be a professional, a member of staff, and all that entails. And as I said before, for some of them, this is like their first real job. They don't necessarily know all this stuff. So how to fill in applications, or do an interview, or respond in a timely fashion, and what that looks like and sounds like. For many, this is either their first job or the first job they did have didn't teach them these kinds of skills, and they just didn't know that was what people were looking for. They didn't take the time to teach those fundamentals. And I think we have the opportunity to do that, and truthfully the responsibility to do that. And so I think doing some hand-holding through the hiring process, giving them helpful hints about how to prepare your best application, or getting ready for an interview, or sharing expectations for contract signing, like this is when it needs to happen, or communication with you prior to arriving at camp and discussing ghosting in the interview and letting them know how to deal with concerns about the job or changing their minds or contacting you and not leaving you hanging. I think we should spell it out and we take this job really seriously, and we expect our staff to handle it with maturity and professionalism. So if you feel you can no longer accept this position prior to the summer, here's what you do. Let's tell them these things, or put it as a question in the interview. So how would you handle getting a better job offer after you've already accepted to come and work at our camp and you don't feel we're the right ones for you with a week to go? How would you handle that? Having those kinds of conversations, I think, is really important. And during training one summer, very near the beginning, I put my staff in really intentional groupings of about 3 or 4 people, and I gave them the opportunity to create their own business. So this was also an activity to get to know each other and build relationships and community and all of that. And they could choose whatever they wanted to create or produce or do with their business. So I gave them categories to discuss, and they had to, create a slogan for the company, draw a logo for the company, framework of how it all worked. And I also asked them how they would hire people, to have that discussion. How would you hire them? What would your expectations be of your staff for this company that you've created? And I had the handout all done and categories and questions, so they worked on that while they were doing this business. And it was a really useful exercise, because not only did it get them knowing new people and allowed them time to get creative, and we found out who the artists were and who all that kind of stuff were, the wordsmiths, but it also gave them time to talk about what it meant to run an organization and what they thought all of that entailed. And you can add in whatever questions you want, but for example, what's your policy on tardiness, especially if you're a day camp and so people are not staying over with you? Or what's your policy on gossip? What issues have you experienced recently or you worry about? Add those questions in to your whole process as you're having your staff do about it. I added in a question about how you best fill in an application, because our applications didn't come in well filled out that year. So you can kind of tailor it to your camp's needs, and I found it to be an incredibly eye-opening experience for all of us. But I would also ask them, how do you plan to keep your staff accountable? And maybe definitely give each group time to present, because, of course, they want to brag about their crazy company and all the ideas and their logo and so on. Maybe you ask them to share 5 things about their company, so you can keep it short, especially for a lot of people, and then have a larger group discussion about some of the other bigger questions like accountability. Another way to walk them through it is to have discussions at training about difficult conversations. So front-loading that you'll have to participate in them at some point, red Jell-O, whatever it is, and you and your staff can create your own framework for those conversations. You can borrow the one from Camp Waro that I know Gabs would talk about if she was here, but she developed the ACT program to help keep her staff accountable for their feelings and for their stress and for all their concerns. So ACT, of course, is an acronym for awareness of your emotions, communicate with someone who can help you, and together you come up with a solution. So staff, I find, often need perspective when they're upset before they can go and deal with it. So they need to talk about it in a safe place to regulate those kind of emotions before they maybe take it to their supervisor or take it to their boss. So Gab teaches them that talking with your friend about why you're upset isn't gossiping. Gossiping is when you don't want a solution, but ACT is when you do. So the person to whom you've gone to talk about your feelings is then expected to keep your confidence, or else it does become gossip. And she found it really helped her staff to be accountable by dealing with their feelings, and it gives them a framework to try to work out what they want to say. So maybe you and I would have a conversation. I say, I really have to go talk to my boss, Travis. What if I said this? What do you think? How would that go? So I would work on ways that you can teach your staff and then allow them to practice accountability during training and use that language. Ask them why accountability is important. Give them examples or ask them for examples of what accountability looks like and then praise the heck out of it when you see it in action. So lots of green jello, all that kind of stuff. Another idea from you, Kim.
Well, first of all, I love the fact that you're speaking my language, Beth, when you talk about, yes, because talking about it like before they even get to camp, right? And I truly believe, as you know, as closely connected to Project Real Job as I am, that is something I think we miss out on a lot, is the opportunity to have those moments to teach them, because they don't know. A lot of them haven't had those experiences with a job before. And so the ways that you described are, there's nothing wrong with having on your website, how to fill out an application, what's important. Like if punctuation and spelling is really important to you, then put that in your notes, right? Or how to dress for an interview, or what not to have in your background when you're on Zoom, or all those things. Yes, and things, have your phone on silent, or all those kinds of things. Just even giving a couple interview questions ahead of time to let staff kind of have that opportunity to maybe practice a little bit or think about it, so we're not trying to catch them off guard and all of that. So all of those things, you're leading up to that accountability that we can continue to build on when we're at camp. And so as you were talking, I think that whole idea of front loading and setting expectations. A lot of camps I know do sort of that contract or the group living code, or something along those kind of lines. And I can see us doing something like that with our staff, where we kind of come to, this is what we are going to agree to live by this summer, or this is what we're going to strive to do, or those kinds of things, and have it written out. And it doesn't need to be a list of 25 things, right? It's not like this so that it's hard to accomplish, or you feel like, oh my gosh, I can't do all these things. We have to make it pretty clear and simple, so they feel like, okay, this is manageable. I can do this, just like we would do with the campers, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe it's having them sign it, or but you have something to go back to when you're and you realize, maybe somebody isn't doing one of these things. Then you can say, remember when we were back in, orientation time, we all signed this. How's it going? Or have you noticed, this or whatever? So I think, again, and we're modeling something that they're going to be doing with the campers, so it makes perfect sense to do something like that with the staff as well.
And you're teaching by example, so you're doing it with the staff, but then they're going to turn around and it's a skill that they can use later. I remember one year doing that, and then partway through the summer when things were not going well and they weren't holding each other accountable, I just walked into a staff meeting with it and put it down on the floor, and they all just kind of went, yeah, okay.
They got it.
They got it right away. I didn't even have to talk about it. And so we just went to, so how do we fix it? Mm-hmm. What is it that we have to do?
One thing that we do, or that I like to do with camps and before the campers arrive, is going back to our values, is to really, and this is another, thank you, Jolly Corley, I learned this from you, is to have staff know what those values look like in action. Because so often we have our values on our websites. I guess 95% of camps have respect as one of their values. Yeah. But respect to you, respect to Travis, respect to me, if we, wrote down our own definition, they're going to be similar, but they're not going to be exactly the same, right? So we want to spell out, what does respect look like for us, especially, summer, whatever summer it is, in this case 2024, what is that going to look like? And give staff an opportunity to kind of picture in their mind what it looks like in action. It's not just a word, but if somebody was to come on our camp and spend a day with us, how would they know that we are being respectful to, or what, that we value respect? That's one of our values. And I think ways I've done that is like having each value on a piece of flip chart paper and then dividing staff up into smaller groups, and they get a couple minutes at each value, and hopefully you don't have more than like 5 or a manageable number, and you go around and you write those kind of, what does it look like, what are the action words, if somebody was to see this, what does it sound like, what does it look like, what does it feel like? And then when the poster gets back to the original group who started it, they then take that and summarize, like they try to pick out. And you can underline things, like if somebody's like, oh yeah, that's a really good one, or circle it, you can start to see the action words bubble to the top, and then you can kind of create your own code for that summer, not a different code, not a code word, but a code of living or conduct, right? And then they really can picture it. They can truly see what it is in action. And then now we have something to hold each other accountable for, because this is what we believe in. This is this is our compass for this summer. And then if you really want to be cool, and I learned this from someone who was at a Camp for You session a couple years ago, and she was teaching it was actually an art activity or craft activity, and she was teaching story through beads, and she was helping like counselors tell the story through beads, like the story of water or the story of, like, it was really fascinating, right? I was just blown away by this idea. And so I started doing with values. So then I have different beads, and then I have a little, piece of string or whatever, and whichever value you would have. So like if your group had respect, you got to pick the bead that represented respect. And then everybody would put that bead on their little string or whatever. And then, so by the end, you'd have your 3, 4, 5 values on there, and everybody had it. So then you're carrying it around with you. And so it's a visual reminder also, right? And then I would also add a couple special questions, like maybe I'd have a heart, what is something that you love? A peace sign, what is something that brings you peace? And then one last bead is something, you get to pick whatever bead you want that's representative of what's unique to you. And I'm telling you, I still have staff who come up to me and they're like, look, Kim, I still have my beads, and even if you do it every year, it's still different. So it's so great, yeah.
And I remember one year doing the same type of thing, but I had jars of on the piano in our lodge, so on the top of the piano, and we had listed all the values, 1 per jar, and there were beads in a little container beside each jar, different colored beads. So for example, respect might have been the blue bead, and kindness might have been the yellow bead, whatever it was. And then people throughout the day could walk through the dining hall, and if they I saw an example of respect just out there in the hallway, and they'd go and put a bead in the respect jar. And so we could see what was filling up throughout the week, and also what wasn't. Mm-hmm. And so at the end of campfire at night, we talked about it. How are our beads doing today? And does anybody want to share an example of what you saw if you put a kindness bead in there? And so you were sharing those values aloud, but then holding us accountable as a team of people, a family living at camp together, and also seeing that, oh, you know what, like our kindness beads are kind of low this week. What's going on? And kind of fill that in that way. But again, like it's the visuals, right, that are so helpful at camp and colorful, and gives you an opportunity to talk about it, to bring down one jar and say, okay, how come this one's so full today? What's going on? This is exciting. Mm-hmm. Or how come this one's not as full today? Mm-hmm. So I love that. Yeah. My last thing would be creating that sense of community is, of course, one of the most important things that we do. And we can do it prior to camp and during training. And another reason to do this, I think, is for staff to be able to say, I want to be accountable to these people because I care about these people. So if you really feel connected to that group of staff, you're going to not want to let them down, or, you know what I mean? So it's kind of building that. So I think if we're focusing, as we all should be anyway, on really building connections and doing that community building during staff training, well thought out team building sequences to learn to be accountable for their roles, and like sort of move beyond obstacles and collaborate on solutions. And of course, by building trust and understanding, staff work together to create a strong dynamic that encourages accountability, right, and leads to better outcomes. And I think we also want to set clear and transparent goals for ourselves and for all of our staff for the summer. So taking time to do that during training also helps to hold us accountable if we have a clear focus on what it is we're trying to accomplish and why. So communicating openly about those goals, I think it also fosters that camaraderie that staff have, and that, I mean, I've worked in a number of other jobs, and I'm here to tell you that there's no camaraderie like camp camaraderie. We all know that, but that it all aligns with everybody's shared objectives. And so, like, before beginning the summer, I think setting up a system of checks and balances to ensure that you're holding one another accountable, and so staff know that they can raise concerns if they have them, and that they're acting appropriately and holding themselves accountable too. So I would have regularly scheduled check-ins, which I'm sure Kim does all the time as well, with your staff, formal evaluations, and please don't wait for halfway through the summer to do your very first formal eval. Set up mentoring programs and with your leadership team so that they can provide that constructive and continuous feedback through those regular conversations, I think is also a way to hold ourselves accountable to ourselves, but also to our team of people. And we're building those stronger relationships of trust and accountability that way. And I also think that if we can focus on building community, that connection with staff and that environment of trust and cooperation, then staff members are more likely to want to hold themselves accountable, to do their job to the best of their ability, to learn and to grow and, to help others, because we all understand the why together, because we've created that together during training. And you all know that if you make a mistake, that mistakes are valued at camp, because that's how we learn, and we're not afraid to speak up and say, hey, I made this mistake, because you know that your supervisor or your director is going to say, that's okay, so what have we learned from it and how do we fix it? What was it that Danny said this morning? Success is a road filled with mistakes well handled, yes, I think is what he said. So that they are there to help you build those skills on your journey, and not just at camp, but in the life that you have ahead of you. So I would be working on creating that community and those connections. I'd be doing it anyway, but this is just another great reason to do that, because making them want to be accountable, I think, is really important as well. Because in so many jobs, the reason people don't stick around is because they don't want to be accountable. They don't feel that desire to do that.
I'm also wondering, Beth, if we might need to connect some dots for staff as well, because they might not totally understand or fully realize the interconnectivity of, like, the impact a choice or decision that somebody makes, how it can affect somebody else, right? Yes. Because when we're at home or school, or like if you're late to class and you just sort of slide in, does it matter to any of the other people in the class? Maybe not. I mean, if you were really loud and you caused a ruckus when you came in, then yes, it would probably matter. But otherwise, people are like, oh, whatever. But if you're late at camp, there's a ripple effect, right? And so, and other things, or if you speak to somebody unkindly, or if you choose to do something, just that whole ripple effect. It doesn't just happen. It just doesn't affect the person that did it. It can affect the whole entire community, right? So somebody doesn't show up for a supervisory job, and can leave people in a mess, right? Because the campers aren't being well supervised or something like that. So I'm not sure if they understand that connectivity part. So I think we might have to spell that out a little more during our staff training. Yeah.
I love that. One year we did an activity where I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, but like 10 years ago or something, but called the ripple effect. Yeah. And so had somebody stand in the center of the circle of staff, and I gave a scenario, a quick sentence. And then anybody who had an idea of what the ripple could be had them run around the rock in the middle of the circle. And while they're running, shouting out what the ripple effect is. And then if somebody thought of a ripple effect off of that ripple effect, then they would run around and so on and so on and so on. And it was really fascinating. It was a fun activity for me to watch because they were all just running in circles. But it was really interesting for them to sort of go, like that could happen and then that could happen. Oh, but that could happen. And they were giving unfortunate ripples, but also really good ripples, So I remember saying like a scenario that I gave was something like a girl was made fun of in her cabin when she put her bathing suit on, and somebody made fun of how she looked in her bathing suit. And then they would give, the ripples of what that could do. And some of it went very negative, and then somebody took it to, and then she became a speaker for body positivity and, like all these things. But just understanding all of the ripples and doing it in a way that's visual for them, that they can kind of see. Or asking them, I asked a question once in a training, what happens if you don't own your own mistakes? What happens? Or you don't own your own stuff, I think is what I said, meaning responsibilities, your mistakes, your attitude, whatever it is, and had the staff tell us what happens. And you could see all the light bulbs going on like, so you're right. Like spelling that out for them, I think it's a brilliant idea.
And what I'm also getting from this, Beth, is that staff training doesn't happen sitting down.
No, not very often.
Right?
Not if you want things to sink in.
No, we have to be, as you've used the word many times, and I'm also a fan of this word, is intentional about how we do this and really give them a way to be involved and connected so it does stick, right? It's not just something that comes in one ear and out the other and they see it on a slide.
Right, exactly. But also that they can become passionate about too. They share the vision, they share those values and your why.
And I think this is also an opportunity to bring up, because you and I are also both fans of ongoing training. Like we don't just do this in the week before camp or however many days or hours you have. Is we live this and we bring it back every week that we have a staff meeting, or it just keeps coming up so that we can just continue to work on our accountability and get better at it, right?
I love that. Well, we don't have Gab with us here today, so I'm not even going to attempt to do a recap because there's no one who can do them like Gab. So, Gab, you get to do the next one.
You're very missed, Gab.
But here's how you can get involved. You can let us know your thoughts on any topic that you'd like us to discuss, or a great guest like Kim Aycock you recommend that we have on the show, or any leadership training tips that you would like to share. We would love to hear from you because we're all about sharing in this industry. And if you found our podcast to be useful, we would love it if you could leave us a rating in your podcasting app because your feedback helps keep the show going. Now, if they would like to get a hold of you, Kim, how could they find out more about you?
So I have a website, Kim Aycock, AYCOCK.com. That's probably the easiest way because my email address has an extra letter. It's Kim D, because that's my middle initial. I wasn't thinking about this when I created my email address, and I still have it, Kim D Aycock at Gmail. And then people really love Instagram, right? And so it's Kim_Aycock_. And that's my Kimspiration. So every Monday, except today I was late, I did a Tuesday inspiration. Maybe because we were at Tri-State and I was a little busy, yesterday, yes. So we had some Tuesday inspiration, but you'll get some Monday Kimspiration each week and some other things throughout the week. So I'd love to connect with you that way. And it's staff training time, getting close, right? So starting to think about how we can be helpful, both you and I, to camps and support you in your work in that way.
And I highly recommend you follow Kim on Instagram. The Monday things are great because, no one really loves Mondays, but you look forward to it because you get some Kimspiration. And you can email me directly at beth@gocamp.pro, or I am on Instagram at topaz_fae, F-A-E. And for our next podcast, we are combing through suggestions from you folks. And as always, we'll pick something very topical and something relevant. Our final segment on each podcast is a best practice for leadership training. And again, we would love to hear yours, so don't hesitate to reach out and let us know. And our best practice this week, of course, is going to come from Kim.
So this one is maybe a little unusual, or what you might not have thought I would say. I'm not sure, but I'm about ready to give a session after this very shortly with Dr. Daniel Shore on one of the things we've noticed is supervising. Even though we don't love the word supervisor, but supervising seems to fall to the bottom of the list. And so we want to keep supervising and those check-ins with staff and giving that feedback, not just in the middle and not just at the end, but all the way through camp. And so helping supervisors have an idea of like how to manage time. And one little thing I saw that I just cannot get out of my head is it's an sort of a diagram, and at the top it says these are things that only you can do, and then below it these are things that some people can do, and then below that is these are some things that anyone can do. So thinking about like some of those things that kind of end up on our to-do list seems to be never ending, there are some things that only you can do, whatever role it is that you're in. But then what are things that some other person can do? And maybe you're empowering somebody else to be able to do something that they are really excited about. And then there's things that anyone can do that sometimes we still do because we think we can do them better than anyone else. So, and that's not true. So just something to think about.
I love that. And it's not the point of camp either. We may be able to do things better than our staff in certain areas because we've been doing them longer. But our job is to teach them. Exactly. And you can't teach them without giving them opportunities to do it. So that's a hard lesson for us to learn. I love that. Thanks so much, Kim. Camp Code is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network, and you can check out all our other podcasts at gocamp.pro/podcasts. So thank you again for joining us, Kim. It was really nice to have a chat with you about things that are so important to both of us. So from all of us here at Camp Code and all of us here at the 2024 Tri-State Camp Conference, thanks for the listening, friends.